Welcome to Live Life in the Spirit. We are your hosts. I'm Pastor Penny Schulz.
And I'm Kristen Scharrenberg. When you are in the midst of a trial, do you feel like you are in a boat being slammed up and down?
Or do you feel like you're alone, literally walking out on the water in the midst of the chaos? If that's where you're finding yourself right now, tune in today for hope and a light in the midst of the storm.
Join us as adventurers through God's Word, the Holy Lands, and beyond, exploring the fascinating and the weird, the difficult and the obscure. Come and see how the stories are woven together and how they still apply to our lives today.
We promise to bring you joy, hope, inspiration, and intriguing out-of-the-box thinking, and ultimately salvation through Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for tuning in with us today. Today's topic is a heavy one, but before we dive in, we just want to take a minute to thank everyone who has been following us and has liked and subscribed on YouTube and subscribed on our website. And just really want to encourage all of you to continue to do that. If there is something that you need from us, if you need prayer, if you need a hand, if you need anything in that respect.
Just to reach out and want somebody to talk to.
We would love to hear from you. If there's something we've said that impacted you in some way, good or bad, we would love to hear from you as well. So please just continue to like and subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Rumble, any of the podcast feeds, and at livelifeinthespirit.com.
Well, today the topic we're getting into is just, we kind of brushed on that last week with temptation and trials, but today we really felt there was so much there last week that we needed to devote just one to trials that we face, those tribulation moments that sometimes seem to mount up and become sometimes a life of long suffering, which is a gift that not usually anybody wants to go, oh, pick me.
Yeah, of all the gifts of the Spirit, that's not one most
long suffering is not a good one. But we know that everyone faces trials.
Oh, absolutely.
Everyone, if you are breathing and older than 2 days old, you face trials.
Face a trial, yeah.
So what better way to look at that than actually through Matthew, Mark, and John? The disciples faced a lot of trials too. But there was one instance in particular that I think we can relate to kind of the most.
Absolutely.
And that was a storm. Now, there were a couple storms that had happened, but this one in particular, this is when Jesus is actually walking on the water. And why I like to bring this up, that if you look into those Gospels, people say, oh, they contradict. No, actually, they're separate times. Mm-hmm. So earlier in those Gospels, they record it. The storm happens, and where is Jesus at time?
He's in the boat.
He's literally sleeping in the boat as the storm is going on. Now, where is this storm at? Why is this such a big deal? It's the Sea of Galilee. Mm-hmm. Now, if you read the different accounts, it'll say the Sea of Gennesaret, the Sea of Bethsaida, it has all these different names. The Sea of Tiberias. It's all the Sea of Galilee.
Mm-hmm. Those are just cities around
it.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've been there.
We have.
I've been there twice. One time I went from north to south. And this time when we went, where did we go?
We started on the west and went to the middle and stopped.
We parked it right at about mile 3 or 4. So the Sea of Galilee, if you were like me growing up, you hear sea and you think of something huge.
Massive.
Right? No, actually most of our lakes around here are bigger than the Sea of Galilee. It's 13 miles from north to south at the farthest tips, and it's a little over 7 miles wide at the farthest tips. So about that 3.5 to 4 mile spot is exactly in the middle of the Sea of Galilee. Mm-hmm. Now there's some other things that you need to know about this sea and what was going on at the time. It's about 80 feet deep at its lowest point. And actually the Sea of Galilee is like 700 feet below sea level. So it is the lowest freshwater lake in the world. And the Dead Sea is the lowest point and lake in the world. They also believed that there were sea monsters in the lake. Now, why would they believe that? I guess this kind of goes back to what we thought about with the whole dinosaurs and the water and 80 feet deep. Who knows what was living under there?
Right, absolutely.
There was a lot of superstitions. You didn't go past that middle part of the lake. One, because there were sea monsters, and two, because on the east side of that lake was what?
That was the starting of the Decapolis.
Exactly, and it was pagan, right? It was bad. It was bad. You don't go there.
Nothing good happens in Decapolis. Nothing good happens on that side of the lake. We just don't go there.
Yes, it was the Vegas of.
A good Jew would not be caught dead on that side of the lake.
Nope, and that's where the prodigal son went. That's why they had the pigs, because they were sacrificing to the deities in those temples. So yeah, I mean, you just didn't go there, right? So Jesus tells them, people just read that and gloss over it. What's the first thing that Jesus says? He tells them to go ahead of him and go to the other side.
Right, so this is the second story.
This is the second story.
Yeah, the first one is when he's in the boat. Mm-hmm. This is when he says, go ahead and go across. I'll catch up. So
we talk about obedience. That was pretty big, because I love that there's no interaction, or at least recorded, that they didn't go, say what?
Because you have to think that they would have gone,
we're not supposed to go there.
I'm good, thanks. Mm-hmm. Especially not without you with us.
And literally, it's on just around the corner from Capernaum. Mm-hmm. They could have walked it when they were at Capernaum how many times? But Jesus is telling them to get in the boat and go across over the sea monsters to where they're not supposed to. And there's another reason why that sea was so dangerous. It's not that big of a sea. No. But it gets its water, it's fed off of the snow melt from Mount Hermon. Mm-hmm. And as the snow melts and it comes down the Jordan River, it goes into the Sea of Galilee. But when you have the cold air from the mountains hitting the warm air from the sea, it causes these squalls to come up. And I mean, we're not just talking a rainstorm here.
Right.
I'm talking just a little wind.
No, we're talking violent.
Violent! And for this little area.
And for what the boats would have looked like. They're not like on some big barge or whatever.
And the waves would get up to 10 to 18 feet tall. It would get that crazy. So another reason why you did not go past center, because you could get back to shore if you needed to, if you saw one of these things coming up.
Right.
The problem was it was already getting evening when he tells them to get in the boat and go across.
So add to the fact that they were going to be going in the dark.
Uh-huh.
And that was an obedience thing.
That was a big obedience thing. And of course, Murphy's Law, right? That's how I live. So they get to the middle of the lake, and what happens?
A storm comes up.
And not just any storm. This is like the mother of all storms. And it says that the waves were crashing and that boat was going up and down. And it wasn't just like we think. No. It was being thrown up into the air and they were being slammed down. This wasn't for just a few minutes. It was 9 hours.
Throughout much of the night.
The whole night.
Yeah. They were, and what were they doing? They were continuing to row and to try to get off the lake.
Well, some were hanging on for dear life, which would probably be Matthew, the tax collector. I'm sure he wasn't all that savvy, but a lot of them were fishermen, and they knew that I got to do something, right? We do that in times of trials, in times when we are in chaos.
We got to do something.
Got to do something.
Let's just keep rowing.
And how far did they get?
Nowhere.
That is so human, isn't it?
It is.
We do the very thing that we're trying to make it better, trying to solve a problem, and we go
not in ways that are helpful.
So then this next part that I love, it's only, in 2 of the Gospels it talks about that they all of a sudden look up and they see what they think is a ghost. Mm-hmm. I find this fascinating because if you just thought about that all night long for 9 hours, you have been at your wits' end trying to row. You are completely physically spent. There is nothing left.
No.
Or if you weren't rowing, you are hanging on for dear life, clinging to anything you could to just stay in the boat.
And you're still completely physically spent.
And you see what you think is a ghost. And they were so afraid. Really? At that point?
I might have welcomed it.
Like, come on, bring it on. They didn't think it was a sea monster. Mm-mm. They thought it was a ghost. Why would there be a ghost walking on the water? But it was Jesus. He said he got up to pray before. That's why he let them go on. That was on purpose. And then he comes walking out to them. But immediately he speaks to them when he sees how terrified they are. And he says, now this is a transliteration. Courage! I am peace.
That's different than what we sometimes hear.
It is.
I like that
very,
better.
very different. So when he says courage, he's not just telling them maybe to take courage. We know that Jesus is what? He is the Word.
Right, he is the Word.
And how did creation come into existence?
Through speaking.
He spoke it. So when he literally speaks the word courage, he is sending forth the courage. He's not telling them, well, muster it up.
Right. He's giving them what they need.
Yes. And then he says, I am. Have you ever thought about that? Because our translations are different.
They are.
But he says, I am. What does I am represent?
God. He is the great I am.
And who is he speaking to?
Well, in part, the disciples.
And what's the other part?
The storm. The chaos.
The wind, the waves, the chaos, the whole thing. He's literally letting the wind and the waves know who he is. I find that interesting that the first account, when he was sleeping in the boat, they say, who is this? And even the winds and the wave obey. Mm-hmm. And now he is literally telling everybody and everything listening, God is in the house.
That's right.
The very person who created the wind and the waves,
just letting you know he has arrived,
is subduing it.
Yeah.
That's why it listened. Mm-hmm. So even if the wind and the waves and the elements of our earth listen to the voice of God. You know, Jesus talked about the sheep. Mm-hmm. They hear my voice.
That's right.
If things are listening to God, why are we not?
We should be.
I had another thought with this too. You know, in the beginning, we know that God created, said he separated the waters. We talked about this. Mm-hmm. It's the Yam, it's the sea, but that was also the name for chaos.
Yes, and the chaos dragon.
Yeah, so there's a dual thing there going. Yes, he subdued and he separated chaos, evil, but he did the waters. I mean, it does say, literally, that the water was there before he formed the land.
Right.
And Jesus is what? The living water. I just, I thought about that. With him creating the water was created before anything else. So he has been Lord over that water since literally before creation.
Right, right.
So when he says, I am, the water took notice. Mm-hmm. And then the second part, you know, the I am, you know, have you said that? You know, like, God.
Are you even here?
I am.
Are you watching?
I am.
God, are you with me?
I am.
Are you looking at my situation?
I am.
Are you in control?
Courage. I am. Puts it into a different perspective, doesn't it?
It really does.
And then he says, peace, be still. Again, he's speaking the peace. But I like that last part, the be still. Because sometimes in the chaos, of course, we're probably not going to feel at peace, are we?
No.
On some rare occasions. But we know it's not from us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? But usually before we can feel that peace, what must we do first?
Pause.
Be still. If just even for a moment. So we can allow ourselves to feel that peace. Mm-hmm. You know, Jesus, the I am, the one who gives the peace that passes all understanding. Paul talked about these words in Philippians 4:6. But he added at the end that It will keep your hearts and your minds in who?
Christ Jesus.
Who is literally in the midst of what? The storm.
The storm.
So what did Paul really mean? Our focus. If we are focusing on the I am, the one that can take control of the storm, then we need to be able to allow ourselves to be still just long enough to watch him work. We don't think of that concept either, do we?
No.
We think of the bad and the doom and the gloom and everything that's around us in that storm when things are chaotic and they're horrible, and we don't stop to think that God not only can take care of this, but he's in charge of that. And all I need to do is sit back and get the popcorn and watch him work.
That's right.
Why don't we do that? Because we're so busy taking the focus is on us, right? What it's doing to me, how it's affecting me. And we don't see how God can step in.
Right. We don't give him the opportunity to show us he's the great I am. Yeah. It's hard when we are in our darkest moments.
Mm-hmm. As I said, you think about this for 9 hours. When we are in troubled spots, they don't just come and go typically.
No.
It's those things that we stay up all night thinking about and going over in our head over and over and over, and it could be hours, days, weeks, months, years.
Yeah.
Why did I bring up this story in the Bible to look at?
Mm-hmm.
Especially maybe given some of the podcasts we've had before. Well, our mantra is the odd, the obscure, the out of the box.
Right.
Somebody calling me in the storm is not exactly within the physical confines. Or how about somebody walking on water? Do you know anyone else who's literally walked on water?
I do not. No. Maybe an illusion, but not who actually walked on water.
And not somebody who's just spoke to the storm and stopped the tornado or the hurricane or...
No, I've never known anyone to have a lot of success with controlling any of nature's elements with their voice.
I think for the most part, we look at those obscure things in the Old Testament and we think of that as the out-of-box thinking, the odd things. But we don't really look at that when we look at the New Testament.
Jesus did a lot of things.
Healing, miracles, multiplying fish and loaves, which Bethsaida, just on a side note, is really cool because it said that's where they were going to. That's toward the north part, Capernaum, where Peter lived. That little part of Bethsaida, they believe, really is where Jesus fed the multitudes. And what happened right above that? They think that's where he was baptized.
That's right. Yep.
How cool is that?
That's amazing.
So when he's telling them to go over there, he'd already just fed them.
They had already seen him perform some pretty amazing miracles that day.
Before the disciples got in the boat, what had happened that day, besides the mass and the crowds, and we have a lady who had the flow of blood who was trying desperately to get to him, and just when she was about to get to, who should show up but Jairus?
Oh, that's right.
And Jairus was urgent because what trial and tribulation was going on in his house?
His daughter was dying at that
time. Everything at that time. So you have a lady who's been in turmoil. You talk about long suffering. Her tribulation had been going on for years, and she was going to be outcast, everything bad, and she's so close. And just as he's ready to turn and leave, she reaches out and grabs. And it wasn't just his hem. That's actually a really loose translation. It was literally the fringe. It was the prayer fringe on the prayer shawl that he was wearing. It was the power.
Yeah, because they wore that to symbolize the law.
Right, and you clip those on, and it reminded them of the law. It was the different strands for the different number of laws that they had, 613.
And just to grab that, she just knew. She had enough faith if she could just touch that.
She knew by grabbing that she would not make him unclean, because he could take that off.
Right.
So all this is going on. There's all these people with all these trials and tribulations, and yet it was Jesus who was there, who healed her. It was Jesus who spoke life back in to the daughter. He is the I am over everything, over any trial, anything that you could possibly have that you're going through. If you think nobody else has gone through it, think again. If you think nobody else has had to deal with the pain that you're feeling, think again. And if you think that there's no way out and no hope, think again. The great I am. Who calmed the storm. And it wasn't just that he hadn't called the storm yet. And that's the part that I love, that is only shown in the Gospel of John. I don't know why. You would think that Peter getting out and walking on water would be talked about.
Right.
And the other ones as well. If Peter says, if it is you, command me to come out to where you are. Again, we forget that Peter is remembering that Jesus had already calmed the storm once before.
Right.
So this was not new. And he knew who Jesus was. He had said, you are the Messiah, the Son of God.
He knew who to trust in that storm.
And in this horrid turmoil storm that Peter's in, he would rather be in the storm, out on the water with Jesus, than in the safety of the boat without him. So what this story is showing, see, Jesus had not spoken yet, other than come. The only word, we focus on the peace, be still, and take courage, and all this stuff. That hadn't happened yet. Peter literally says, command me. And the only word out of Jesus' mouth is come. But if you think about that, Peter saying, command me, and Jesus commanded the storm. I love that analogy. But in the presence of the storm, the great I am shows up, right? He says, do not take your eyes off of me. Because what happened? Peter was fine until
he took his eyes off
and he started to sink. But what I love is it says Jesus immediately, didn't say he thought about it for a while, immediately he caught Peter's hand. That's why this picture means so much to us.
Yeah.
And as he brings him up, you know, we talked about last week wisdom. What are we supposed to ask for that we will be given in abundance?
Wisdom.
Wisdom, ask, seek, knock. But there was a catch to that. We could have it if we did not
doubt. We had to have faith.
Peter had the wisdom to get out of the boat. But what did he do?
Took his eyes off Jesus.
And he doubted.
Yep. He got caught up in looking at the storm around him, and he took his focus off the only thing that could keep him safe.
And he doubted. Because Jesus said, oh, you of little faith. Now, Peter had more than a little faith. But what he was saying was it was the little faith. Because we know the little faith, the size of a mustard seed.
That's right.
Is all we need to move mountains. So literally, we should be walking on water with a little faith. But there was the catch that we don't always get. Why did you doubt? So it's after all of this, after he takes Peter, that he says, courage, I am, be still. And then, I love the last part of this. Jesus was literally walking on the water. It says everything just stopped. Storm, immediately, done. He could have kept on walking. Peter could have kept on walking with him. But he didn't. He climbed into the boat with all the rest of them, with the huddled masses that had been struggling all night long. Difference was now, the great I am was with him.
Right there in the boat.
So that's kind of the meat and potatoes portion of this. We know the story for most people. We know it from the different Gospels. We know it from the different angles. But maybe we gave you just a little bit to think on it differently. And I'm really excited. Well, we said it's going to be heavy, but I'm really excited to have what do you do with that? What we get into. Because this is where you are at right now. You, the viewer. You know, you're not in that specific boat in Galilee, although you may have been in that boat during the storm. But I'm pretty sure you didn't try to walk on water.
No.
And you may be going, well, that's great, but that doesn't apply to me. But what we're about to talk to next, I can guarantee will definitely apply and hit you right where you're at. But we're not going to leave you there. We're not going to leave you in the midst of the storm. We're going to leave you with some tools in your toolbox and some hope. But right now, I think we're going to leave you with some joy.
That's right.
So I think it's a good time for
Joy break. All right, so since we've been talking about going through trials, I thought we would give you some tangible ways to handle stress.
We need that.
Yes. Okay. Number 1, jam 39 tiny marshmallows up your nose and try to sneeze them out.
Ow.
When someone says, "Have a nice day," tell them you have other plans.
Like that.
Make a list of things to do that you have already done and check them all off.
There you go. Those things that you did yesterday.
Yeah, that's right. Dance naked in front of your pets.
I can see the dog.
That's the eyes on the bed. Put your toddler's clothes on backwards and send them to preschool as if nothing was wrong.
It's probably been done a lot of times.
Write a short story using alphabet soup. Make up a language and then ask people for directions in it. I can say there are good ways to handle stress.
How would they know that you're even asking directions?
Well, you can really ask about anything. Yeah. There's a couple other ones on here that are odd. Polish your car with earwax.
Oh, gross.
Read the dictionary upside down and look for secret messages.
Oh, there you go. Backwards.
Yes, yes. I kind of like this one. Bill your doctor for the time you spend in their waiting room.
There you go.
Yes. Lie on your back eating celery. Use your belly button as a salt dipper.
Ah, that really stress. I like celery.
It's true. Salt? You're doing that, not celery. Stare at people through the tines of your fork and pretend they're in jail.
Well, that's not the one we just read.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll end on that note. That's enough. So thank you for joining us on that joy break.
That was nice. I was going to say, when you said with alphabet soup, I was going to say, now if you put it in the Instapot. Morse code.
No, it would be invisible ink. Yes, if you put noodles in the slow cooker for too long, they magically disappear. I didn't know I was a magician until I made dinner yesterday.
Not necessarily magically delicious, just magically disappear.
Yeah, well.
So what do you do with that? What storms are you facing right now in your life? Maybe even right now at this present moment. They can be ongoing, but you're still dealing with it. Let me ask you this. Are you bouncing up and down in a boat? Like, and I'm not just talking like riding the waves. I mean, like, are you feeling like you're literally smacking?
And your whole world is lacking.
And you are hanging on for dear life.
And not even knowing which end is up.
Or are you literally trying to do the impossible and walk on water while the storm is raging around, being out there all by yourself without even the comforts of some soggy boards? Well, I am sure that for everybody listening to this, you're probably at one of those points, or have been recently. Mm-hmm. As we said before, if you're breathing and you're older than 12 hours old, you've gone through trials.
Absolutely.
Well, it's pretty obvious with my line of profession that I deal with people with every issue I mean, because it's daily life.
Absolutely.
Everything that gets hit at you, from losing a job to losing a spouse to having marriage dissolved to children going astray or really struggling with trying to keep them on the straight and narrow to youth group to oh yeah, that was just today's trial.
Right.
Yeah, it was. So I mean, it's the whole gambit.
Right.
It's the whole gambit. But maybe you have probably experienced it from a whole different side.
Sure. So we both have had the blessing and the unfortunate part of meeting people at their worst sometimes. And I know from the mental health side of things, I have seen people that have struggled with things that seem really unimaginable to even know how they would get through, and other things that maybe to me seem like not as
Trivial, yeah.
big of a thing. But what I guess learned through so much of that was each person's struggle and each person's journey is so individual. And what might be incredibly difficult for me might not be that big of an issue for you. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. Just like we talked about, even with the temptations, what's a temptation for you might not be that big of a temptation for me, and vice versa. And our struggles are similar to that. And so I guess for me, one of the things that I just want people to keep in mind when we're walking with people through that are struggling, or when you see someone that's struggling, or when you yourself, is we can't compare.
No.
And that can be one of the first places where we really start to get hard on ourselves and make it harder, because you think, well, I shouldn't be struggling with this because, Penny's been through something so much worse and she seems to be handling it so much better. Well, first of all, we don't always know. And second of all, everybody's different.
It's kind of like pain.
Oh, absolutely.
They say rate your pain on a scale, It's like for some people they have no pain tolerance, and other people can be walking around with a broken arm for 3 days and go, yeah, no, I probably should go in.
Just let's just scratch,
Yeah. You can't compare.
Right.
And there is no right and there is no wrong. It's just what you're dealing with at the time.
Absolutely. And so I guess, I don't know, a little disclaimer on that is that as you're going through trials in life, make sure you don't feel like you shouldn't be struggling or you're comparing yourself to someone else, because we just each have our own journey.
Well, and when you just stuff it all the time or you just try to bury it, it's still there. Eventually it will come out, and not in pretty ways.
Absolutely, yeah. It doesn't go anywhere. It just comes out in unexpected ways.
People go, I just got through that. Well, no, you're still dragging it behind.
Oh, for sure.
You think of that suitcase.
Mm-hmm.
And you just keep every trial that comes, you just keep packing it in that suitcase going, yeah, I'll take that on a trip with me someday. But even in the midst, while you're doing that, you're dragging that suitcase behind you all the time, and it gets heavier and heavier. And pretty soon you've outgrown that suitcase, you gotta get another suitcase, and pretty now soon you filled a whole room full of suitcases that you have not opened, and you're sitting there going, yeah, no, I can't do that now.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I open it, it's a can of worms that's ready to explode.
Right. Because it doesn't go anywhere. We just carry it forever until we deal with it, process it, heal from it. So I know in my line of work, so many of the struggles that I saw were around mental health, or at least made worse by that. And so, depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, any number of the personality disorders, schizophrenia, and all of those kinds of things. So even addiction is considered a mental illness and is covered under that umbrella. And so much of those mental illnesses are created through or made worse by trauma. And some of the worst traumas that people can go through and have to work their way through. I know we've talked about, we've seen everything from, the child abuse and just abuse in general and domestic violence and that kind of thing. I've seen victims of violence in the community, like I've dealt with gangs and some of that kind of thing. Satanic ritual abuse, SRA, we talk about that. and going through the horrors of what that entails, and all of the things that break us in some way. Oftentimes, trials and tribulations do make us feel like we are broken.
And they can be a snowball effect.
Oh,
it can
100%.
start with dissolution of a relationship, which then leads to homelessness, which then leads to financial difficulties, which leads to bankruptcy, but then I can't get anything because now I'm bankrupt or I've had to move and now I got to get a different job and I got to find a new place to live and now what about my kids? If there's kids involved, I mean, it's a snowball effect. It's not just typically one thing.
Right.
And when we really feel, I mean, you can have one thing that could be a trial. But when the storm comes is when you've had multiple, when you think of a storm, it's not just rain. It starts with the buildup.
Absolutely.
And it starts with, it has thunder, and it has lightning, and it has rain, and it has wind, and sometimes hail, and sometimes tornadoes. And I mean, it is everything all encompassing at once.
And it can just genuinely make you feel like you just don't know. You don't know which end is up. You don't know where to even turn.
And you don't even want to get out of bed in the morning.
Right.
When I think of trials, we again have all experienced them. If you're married, and I've been married for 29 years, there's going to be things that you're going to go through together, whether it be through illness or injury or a death or a loss of a job or moving. There are so many things that compound that. And then if you have children, you throw that in, that continues to compound. For some of you out there listening, you may be fortunate enough to be like me, that I have not had to deal with a factor of mental illness being a part of that. That has been a blessing because even the load of everything, there are times where it has gotten to the point where you feel like it's just one more thing. Just snap. I've been there several times. I guess the big thing is to recognize that and to know that that's okay and that's normal, but then, try not to snap. Okay, so now it's time to really process, why is this going on and who is there in the storm that's with me, that I'm not out walking on that water by myself.
Right. Absolutely.
And so there's probably a lot of you that can relate with me. I mean, my life is far from smooth and easy, but my life has just been different than other people.
Right. I can offer my perspective on that from my side of things. I have been through and been diagnosed with major depression and then a fairly significant panic disorder. And then it kind of changed to this treatment-resistant depression. And for years, I can tell you that I know what it feels like when you just don't have what it takes to get out of bed in the morning, or when you've got 10 things to get done and you have within you in that cup or in that reservoir enough to do 2 of them. So you have to make some tough choices, and if you have kids, probably that will come in and they'll be taken care of to the best of your ability. But then that means that you don't have a lot left for yourself. I've sat in some pretty dark places walking through that and felt at times like I was alone. But that's what mental illness does to you. Because I've always had my faith, and I don't feel like that ever shook. I was never shaken. It wasn't ever like I thought God had abandoned me by any stretch. But I just felt like I couldn't feel him or hear him or see him. And
that's probably even worse, isn't it?
Yeah, because that's what depression and anxiety are 1-2 punch together, is it makes you feel like you're doing something that's keeping you from being able to, because God's not going to withhold himself from me. So it's got to be me. Like, I'm doing something to make it so that I can't see him or feel him or hear him. Then you start getting really anxious about what you might be doing, and then you're too depressed to do anything about it. So it's just...
And what little bit of energy you had, you're spending the whole time worried
about it all. Yeah, it's not a great combination. So anyone, and I say that a little bit of lightheartedness now, but in those moments there wasn't lightheartedness for sure. And I was so incredibly blessed. And I know that this is where a huge difference comes in for so many people, that I always had people that cared and that would provide that, a phone call or a text message or a stop in, or at times an email. Gosh, I feel old. Or just
I don't know, it'd be letters and cards.
And letters and cards. I had some friends that we liked to write back and forth. We did that. But I was incredibly fortunate because I can think of 2 or 3 different times in particular when I was just really struggling in one way. And I wasn't always great at sharing about it, because that's another thing, is you don't want to be a burden. You don't want to feel.
You don't want people to know that you think broken.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. And I didn't want my parents to worry about me, or them to have to
well, we live in a society that looks at that and sees weakness. But that's a neat thing, what we looked at last week. Because Paul said what?
In our weakness.
It's in our weakness
that we
are glorified and we are made strong through Christ.
But I can think of 2 or 3 different times specifically. This one in particular, I had a friend that we went to college together, and then just kind of went our separate ways. She was living in Kansas still. I was actually living in Alaska at the time. And it was one of those that we would talk every now and again on the phone, but life was busy. We kind of drifted apart. And out of nowhere, I got a card from her and some prayers and some scriptures. And she just said, I don't know why, but I just knew you needed these. I still have the card and the prayers and the scriptures because I did. And that was her answering God's, the Spirit just told her that that's what I needed, and she listened. And that made such a huge difference. Just to know that someone cared enough to do that. And it was cool because it was someone whose denomination was different than mine. And so the prayers might not have been familiar to me, but I came to really love those during that time because of what they represented as far as that
had nothing
support.
to do with the words and nothing to do with the structure of how it was done.
It was a reminder
and the prayers behind it.
Absolutely. And a reminder that not only did I have a friend that cared enough to listen, but I had a God that was big enough to say, she needs this right now. And he could see that he could see me. But there were definitely some times where the light didn't feel quite so bright, or felt really far away. Or as you have lovingly said sometimes when someone says there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, it's a train. I try to be very much a optimist, but that's by choice. I have to, because, I know you say that, but I do.
I know.
I'm always like, people say, oh, I'm a half glass full. No, I'm just thankful I have a glass.
Yes, you are.
That can be refilled.
That's right.
Because unfortunately, by genetic predisposition, personality-wise, I come from maybe a little more negativity than that. Oh yeah, you think I'm negative now, honey. You should have seen me before. But that is something, if you are a negative person anyway, it doesn't take too much to throw you into that full-blown depression. And I think that's why I came to a point, and this was even like probably 30 years ago plus, I was at a point where I needed to find people who had positive attributes that I liked, and I sat down and started writing them down. What I liked about that person, because I wasn't feeling it and I couldn't pull that out of myself at the time, and it just took a lot of praying over those. And that's really, then people would say I was over optimistic. But I would rather be over optimistic, and now I just tell everybody I'm a realist. But
You found
the difference.
You found the middle ground. Ish. No.
So more than likely the light at the end of the tunnel is a train.
But that's one of the things that sometimes when we are offering support to people, or when people are offering support to us, it's not very helpful.
No.
And as helpers, we've had
giving support, you have to be very careful.
And we've had to learn how to do that in ways that are actually meaningful. That certainly doesn't mean that we get it right all the time.
No. Or what we think would be meaningful to us is not what they need.
Right. So we thought we'd maybe touch on some of the phrases that we offer to people and talk a little bit about what might not be good about it, but then offer some of what the depth that you can get from them. So,
or what things to steer away from when you're trying to help people.
Yeah, both.
From a trial.
Yes, 100%. Because there's
I can't row the boat. Well, here's a bigger oar.
Maybe that's what we should have done on the joy break.
I remember that story.
Yeah.
So the things that are not helpful, well-meaning, when you're talking to somebody who's in the midst of that storm,
right,
and the waves are throwing them up and smacking them down, don't look at them and go, oh, honey, this too shall pass.
Yeah, and that's what we've often offered to people.
But in a different way.
Right, but when you're, or the light at the end of the tunnel one,
Mm-hmm.
I remember thinking, when I am sitting alone in the dark, telling me that eventually there will be a light to come does not make me any less scared today.
No, and eventually this too shall pass. I want it to pass now, right now. I want it done yesterday.
Right.
Not
something tangible that tells me I'm going to get through this, because sure, it'll be great in 3 weeks when this is over.
But what more hell am I going to go through until then?
Right. This one is, we talked about this last week, but
Yes,
I think it's worth mentioning again.
Mm-hmm.
It's your favorite.
I know.
God never gives us more than we can handle.
Yeah, no, not scriptural.
It isn't.
And not helpful.
No, because when you're in the midst of a storm, you're like, dude, I can't handle this.
I can't, how much more do I have to handle then?
He thinks way highly of me.
You're trying to reach my full potential? Don't want it. How about joy comes in the morning?
And that's actually from Psalms.
Yeah,
and
Psalms 35. And while it can be a help, not when it's done flippantly.
Right, right. Because the whole verse is, for his anger is but for a moment. His favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes with the morning. So weeping may linger for the night is the part that when you're in the weeping, knowing that joy is coming doesn't necessarily make the weeping any better.
It's just a hope.
Right.
And you think, and this was written in the Psalms, but it is actually referring to with Christ. While he was in the tomb.
Right.
There was a lot of weeping going on,
Absolutely.
but there was joy in the morning when he resurrected. And eventually, your darkest of times will come out joy. But those aren't necessarily things that we want to just throw out.
No. And when you're in those moments, they're not tools for your toolbox to get you through.
Or how about this one? I'll pray for you. It can be both ways.
Right.
Yes, we need to be prayed for. Yes, we want to pray for others. But how are you doing it?
Right.
You know, or if I was to say, I am so sorry. I wish I could take this from you. And I will truly pray that God will take this soon.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot different than just, sucks for you, I'll pray for you. But I know that's not the meaning, but sometimes that's how it comes across.
Well, and I'm going to add to that. When you tell someone you're going to pray for them.
Do you do it?
Right. We have a friend who is very good at knowing himself and knowing that if he says he's going to pray for someone and he doesn't do it in that moment, that he'll forget. And that's something that I've also done for myself because life can get crazy. So if I say, oh, I'll pray for someone or I'll pray for you, I either, and it might sound funny, but I will either put it in my phone as a reminder or I'll just take the time right then. Or what if you just prayed with them in that moment?
I've done that. I've actually put prayers on Facebook when they've asked for prayers.
Oh,
just type a
100%.
little prayer or on text. And you'd be surprised the people who said, oh, thank you. That was beautiful. Or, that's just what I needed. They needed that. You've got this.
Thanks.
Not helpful.
I don't believe you. I'm drowning.
Again, it's said well-meaningly, but it just, on the other, it's not helpful.
No, because it would be like if you were drowning and someone said, "You're a really good swimmer. You'll be all right.
You got this."
Thanks. How about the life vest? No? Okay, just checking. Or, you're stronger than you think.
Which is true, but if you're not feeling strong at the moment at all, you're feeling about as helpless and weak as it can be. How about everything happens for a reason? You know, I don't think everything does happen for a reason. God can use everything.
Right.
He can use every situation, the good, the bad, the ugly. He can use every person, their brokenness, their patched up, sewed up, glued up.
Right.
You know, he can use it. But not everything happens for a reason. We live in a sinful world. We live with sinful people. We are sinful.
Right.
We make bad choices. We hang around with people that make bad choices. Things happen.
We are impacted by people making bad choices, even if those aren't the bad choices we're making.
9/11 did not happen necessarily for a reason for those people who died in there.
Right.
It happened.
The family who gets wiped out by a drunk driver who was just going to a Christmas pageant or a, whatever, family dinner.
God didn't sit up there and plan it.
Right.
And I think, I don't know if that makes us feel better when we say that. Like, then we don't have to take responsibility. Maybe that could be. For some of the decisions that we make that cause us to be in the trials we're in, we don't want to have to admit that it was because of really bad decision making that put us there in the first place.
Right. It can be hard to accept our own responsibility for some of that. And when we're going through really difficult times, we tend to want to have someone to blame.
Oh, you know it.
And if everything happens for a reason, then it's God's fault this is happening to me.
What was that? How many here ever saw Bruce Almighty? And he says, God's the kid with the magnifying glass and I'm the ant. He was just mad. He was wanting to blame God for everything.
I have no bird. I have no bush. Yeah.
It's real easy to get into that pity party if we want to. And trust me, if you want to have a pity party, what's the song? It's my party and I'll cry if I went to.
Absolutely.
You can find ways to continue to stay there. Yeah, that's a whole other episode. How about God works all things for good? Again.
That is technically scriptural. Comes from Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That doesn't mean that God makes all things happen or that everything that happens is good. It means that no matter what...
Make beauty from ashes.
That's right. That's much more eloquently than I was going to say.
It's true.
It is.
We just bring our ashes to him and he can... I was thinking I have some necklaces that when we went to Hawaii, a gentleman there had painted. He was an artist, and he took the dust, he ground up seashells.
Oh, wow.
And mixed them into paints and painted these scenes. That was just phenomenal, and that's what I think of with beauty to ashes. I used to attend a church in Syracuse, Nebraska, when we were first married and stuff, and after we had left and I was a pastor elsewhere, they had a fire. And it was a big old church and old wiring, and it took the whole church. And when I was back sifting through the rubble, I was picking up pieces. I had the brick, and I had the mortar, and I had the charred wood, and I had the melted glass. And I had written a thing up and put it in a jewelry box that was made up of broken glass, now turned into a beautiful picture. And how even through that, God made beauty. But that was quite a trial.
Oh, absolutely.
That was a lot of tribulation, too.
Being able to sift through the ashes and know that something beautiful would come from that. That's even a different place than when you're in the fire.
Yep. As we said last week, you're either going into the fire in the fire, or coming out of the fire knowing you're going to go right back in again.
And that really is where this too shall pass can be meaningful.
I actually like that saying. I don't tell it to people flippantly. But I say it on the good stuff too. Grab on to the moments that are good, because it will pass and it'll change. Those times that are really, really rough when you're in the storm, now if I was being smacked up and down, no, I would want that to pass pretty quick. But on our day-to-day, on the stuff that just really sucks, it's really, really hard, I do tell people, when I say appreciate, that doesn't mean like it. That just means appreciate that time, because it will pass. And there are things that change. Well, okay, so for those who don't know, my husband had a really bad accident about 1.5 years ago. Left him with a lot of brain trauma. And God has been good through that time. A lot of doctors, a lot of therapy, a lot of healing. But in the bad, there were still glimmers of things that were good, that were better than not. He was a workaholic. He was never home. Well, now he's home all the time. In the beginning, that wasn't so bad. And then all of a sudden, I got to where, now you're cramping my style. Get better. I want you to go back to work. There was a time when my husband was working literally out of state. I mean, so I was home raising kids all by myself, holding down a farm, holding down horses. And when I say horses, we had 27 miniature horses at that point. You know, it was a working farm kind of. And little ones, like I had one that I just had a C-section with. So she was just newborn. And dealing with all that. And then the resentment of having to do life, so I could understand how military men or women go through with their spouses when they're gone. Mm-hmm. And then when he came home, everything shifted again, you know, and I was upset because he was never around. But then when he came home, well, it was great because he just stayed home. He didn't work for a while, and he was around with the kids, and he was around with us, and that was wonderful. But then I was like going, okay, don't you need to be getting back to work again? You know? Mm-hmm. And I finally, it was when God got a hold of me. And he's like, this will pass.
Enjoy it.
Just enjoy and appreciate the moment while it's here. Mm-hmm. And so through this whole last 2 years of difficulty, trial, tribulation, I have embraced all of it in a way. I'm not saying I've liked it at all, but I've learned to know that the good and the bad will soon pass. Mm-hmm. It'll be on to something. As I said, it'll be on to some other nightmare. Different.
Yeah, she's an optimist.
But
then there will also be other joys.
Yes, there'll also be other joys, there'll be other lows. That's life. Don't get caught up in the bad stuff, and I realize that there are people who get stuck in that bad stuff and can't see that it will pass, right, that it will get better.
Right.
They're just stuck there.
But I have come to appreciate this too shall pass in a different way. Mm-hmm. Along with be present in the moment.
Yep.
Because that was another one that I used to think,
this moment sucks.
I'd really rather be anywhere but here, thanks. But that goes with the fact that all of it will change. And I can't, yes, some things in life we have to just get through. But if we allow ourselves to be present, sometimes we can see some glimmers. And if we take that time to pause, then that's where we can look and we can see the lights, or we can find our hope and hold on to be able to find our peace in the storm. Mm-hmm. But if we're just going, la 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 la, we can miss some things.
That's why I like that part with the disciples. No matter how bad the storm was, they were exhausted, they were beyond sheer exhaustion. I don't know how you could even hold on any longer after that, because it was bad. It'd be hard enough to hang on to something if you were just constantly doing this for that long. Mm-hmm. But to have this constant slamming all the time, and to take their focus off of the storm long enough to think that Jesus was a ghost. It's like, what splits your attention? And yet, the point was, in the midst of that storm, it only took that little bit to draw their attention to him. Mm-hmm. And it was enough for Peter to know who it was.
Right.
And he said, if it's you, he knew it was him, command me The same God that was going to soon command the storm, who he had heard command the storm before. He's saying, command me, and I can do the impossible. I can, if it's so much as getting out of bed in the morning, I can do the impossible. I can put on a sock, maybe not two, but I can put on a sock and I can get out of bed.
I shared that I have been in that place with depression and anxiety where there were times when I didn't have it in me to, I couldn't have gotten up and taken a shower and gotten dressed and say gone to the store. I didn't have enough to do all of that. So then it became, well, I really need food in my house. So I'm going to put on a hat and hope I don't run into anyone that I know, because then they'll know something's wrong, because I haven't showered in several days. But I know I don't have enough to do all of it. And so I'm going to do what I know I have to do to survive. So if you're in those places where you just don't have enough, there is a way out. I can tell you, sitting on the other side of it, that there is healing and there is hope. And if it wasn't for my faith and if it wasn't for Christ, I don't know where I'd be sitting today, but it wouldn't be here.
So I guess the main part of this, what do you do with that? If you're in a spot where you're wondering, now what do I do? How do I get out of this? That all sounds great and wonderful, but I'm stuck here. Or maybe you're like going like me. You know, I've just had so many things pounding up on me that if there's just one more thing, and the problem is you get so focused on that one more thing that could cause it. What are you doing to seek help? What are you doing to help alleviate that anxiety, that stress, that burden?
So my son, my oldest son, is really good at asking questions that make me think. And one of the things that he was talking about this last week was why we go to church. And just wondering, aside from the fact that I think he felt like the sermon might have been something he needed to hear but didn't want to hear. I don't know who does that kind of stuff. But he just wondered why we go to church. And I think about the times when I was in some of my darkest places. My church family is what kept me from completely losing touch. And I have the fortunate blessing of some good core family members too. But having people outside of you that are your safe space, that you can talk to, and that can offer hope and reminders that even when they can't be there with you, that we're not walking through this alone.
You know, the shirt that I have on today is in the waiting, God is still working. And I think that is such a perfect picture of Jesus. Peter was sinking. Immediately, he says, he grabs his hand, he pulls him up, but he didn't toss him in the boat. It said he climbed into the boat, not just with Peter, but with those other disciples who were scared, spitless, and tired, and spent, and didn't have a shred of energy left. He crawled in the boat with them. He was still working. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's what we really want to leave you with. No matter what your trial is, no matter what stress you're under right now, or maybe anxiety, just know that we serve a God who doesn't just say, peace be still, and call the storm and say, okay, now you're all better. He literally climbs in the boat with you and holds you tight. And he says, I got this. Or if you're still sitting in the boat, frantically trying to row, and you find you're going nowhere, let the master say, drop the oars. Just sit for a moment and be still. Because I have a feeling when you take that time, not only will you find peace, but he's going to give you the answer that you have been desperately praying and asking for. So until next time, Shalom.